Thank you so much to the University of Witwatersrand for inviting me to today's Global Climate Finance Conference, and in particularly, thank you to Professor Dr. Gay Van Woeren, one of my dear old friends. We've known each other since, God, 2004, I think. We've worked on a variety of projects together, done some research, written a variety of books. You can find all this stuff out there. And Guy is currently, as far as I know, also in the UK, so I need to catch up with him. I'm joining you this morning from London, and hopefully this all works virtually. And I'm delighted to walk you through part of the work I do with artificial intelligence drones, as well as very briefly some of the United Nations work, which has now led to an AI common regulatory arrangement and declaration, and we're currently reaching out to 193 member states, asking them to become formal signatories to this a little bit more later on. Before we go into this, the drone you can see here is actually a real drone. It's one of mine, and I'll show you an example in a minute. That's the 00 Robotics V-Copter, which looks big, but it's actually really small and really lightweight. My background is, from a drones perspective, I've been using drones for an awful long time, I have to say. Now, I built drones, particularly small ones, before you could actually buy them in the shops, and I'll give you an example in a minute. Today's flight plan, given that we have, I think, around 35 minutes and maybe 10 minutes or so for Q&A, I want to give you a very brief introduction, which is really this first slide here in my background. Then I want to cover my work in this particular domain, looking at features and use cases, but also at the main concerns around drones. Then I want to take a look at existing ethics frameworks, international ones that are out there, because we don't really have to reinvent the wheel when we want to do this stuff, and see how we can adapt them for the use of these kind of innovative tools. Then I'll put this in sort of Amazon Blue almost. It's what I call the ad break, 2, maybe 3 minutes on this piece of work for the United Nations. I mean, there's plenty of stuff out there, and there's some bonus materials also in these slides at the end, and hopefully WITS will be able to distribute those to you so you can watch the videos and everything else multimedia that's included here. And then finally, sort of culminating all of this, I want to talk a little bit about ethical governance of AI drones, bearing in mind that this is a global climate finance conference, so you've got the overlap of the work around finance funding, what banks, financial institutions are doing, and that's actually my background. So I've been in the banking space, risk management space now for, well, more than 30 years, to be honest. But also over time, I've taken these approaches, moved a little bit more into innovative technologies, including drones, and then also looked at the implications from a climate perspective. And I'll give you some examples of my habitat restoration and protection work. So as I said, I am an actual certified drone pilot. I use exclusively, I should say, sub 250 gram drones. These are the very small ones. They are, as I said, as heavy as a pound of sugar, basically, which means a very limited risk, but automatically also a very large operational envelope, because you can use them almost anywhere in most countries. From a regulatory perspective, you are allowed to fly over people as well, which is great. And in an urban environment, of course, you need to be mindful of all sorts of, airspace restrictions, particularly if you fly in London, for instance. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit feedback here. I don't know if it's possible to turn the volume a little bit down on your side, or do I need to talk a little bit quieter? It's better now, but for some reason it's sort of It sort of appeared in my headphones. Otherwise, I just take the headphones off and then I don't hear myself. Let me know if that causes any issues. And yeah, as I said, I've started back in the early 2000s building drones when you couldn't actually get them. That's one of an early example. That's what I call the wood drone, which is basically a wooden frame, 4 motors, a control board. It's literally a sandwich box at the back, a couple of rubber rings and a keychain camera that you couldn't buy in the shops. You had to get this shipped from China and then put this stuff together. But in the meantime, these things have evolved, and the drone you can see at the top here is it's a DJI Mini 3 Pro. The latest version of these, the Mini 5 Pro, I think is coming out in a couple of weeks, and the features that are built in, including the AI features, are quite frankly ridiculous. So anyway, that's a little bit about myself background. Oh, and also wanted to say 2 things. I'm a beta tester for 00 Robotics, so I test their new drones when they come out, including things like the Hover Air X1, the Hover Air Pro Max, and then also we've got the V-Copter here, the one you saw at the beginning, and I'll show you a little bit more in a minute about that. And also, I do not cover, this is only consumer drones, so stuff you can buy in the shop. I do not cover military drones, autonomous drones that are used for defense or national defense purposes. And national defense purposes is also excluded from my United Nations work, because that's national policies. That's got nothing to do with me. And frankly, you know, what's ethical about a war? A war is never going to be ethical. So that's a pointless discussion, really. So let's focus on the civilian use of drones, and there's some very good examples here. Right into the features and the use cases, bearing in mind we've got this sort of climate thematic here. The first use, which you probably will be most familiar with, is of course air photography and videography. Drones are simply, in my mind, flying cameras, very sophisticated flying cameras with a lot of additional augmented AI features on here. The picture you can see is taken 5 minutes for me. I'm in a very lucky position, living outside London, very close to one of the largest local nature reserves that are here, and that's a picture I think I took last year with one of these small drones, a little bit AI enhanced, so you get to see the background in the skyline in the back there, because this is about 12-15 miles away from city centre of London. But this is what one of the most well-known, I guess, use cases of these mini consumer drones are. Obviously there for photography, videography, but that also means, because you've usually got a very high quality camera, typically 4K, sometimes even 6K or 8K these days. The Hover Air Pro Max has got an 8K built-in camera, so the quality you get out of this is very, very crisp, very sharp, and you obviously got built-in zoom features as well, which basically means you can collect a lot of aerial data, and that is something I use specifically with my habitat restoration and protection work. I go out there, I turn these drones, and I'll tell you a little bit more in a minute, into flying AI robots that autonomously then fly up into the sky, collect aerial data based on pre-programmed waypoint missions, collect that data, then you run it through some 3D geospatial modeling software. And what you then can do is you can essentially build digital twins of all sorts of environments. I usually use it for nature reserves. I've recently done a bird study here with one of the London local councils, and this is about 18 lakes or so. They ask me to collect air data because they combine that with other factors, and they want to understand urban wildlife and migratory patterns and so on. And that's my contribution. But there's some more use cases I will share in a minute. The way I look at this, it's a very simple, affordable, and modular way to building flying AI robots. Previously, what you needed, and I'm not going through the whole list here, you can read this up once you got the materials, but previously it was very tedious, very expensive, required a lot of knowledge, required a lot of coding, computational experience in order to collect aerial data. I've developed over time a approach that is much more lightweight from a workflow perspective. It's modular, so you can see at the bottom here, this is a waypoint software that allows you to map this out first. Then you use one of these lightweight consumer drones. The one you see at the bottom here is a DJI Mini 3, is my favorite drone that I use for modeling for all sorts of reasons. And then you use the modeling software and you put all this information together and you end up with these beautiful, very lightweight 3D aerospatial, geospatial models that can be used for all sorts of purposes. If you want to find out more about that, it's in the back of the slides, but you can also find it on YouTube. There is a TED talk I've given a while back now about using flying robots and AI to combat climate change. Some of the use cases, the first one is a local one, literally behind my house, more or less. There was a floodplain that was plagued by regular seasonal flooding, and obviously there is a housing estate on both sides, and I've worked with the local park rangers team, Thames 21, which is a London-based charity, and we've developed and basically built a complete new wetland layer with 3 small ponds, which means the water can now come out of the river, overflow, distribute itself into the ponds. I've documented the whole process of this over the last 2-3 years with the drone. In fact, a lot of the modeling work was also used to do the planning for this. It's been a hugely successful project, and it won the UK National River Prize Award last year because it has been so successful. And it's one out of 12 global sites that are contributing to a global research project looking at sustainability and longevity, what can be done. And I've also been invited by them a few months ago to present globally on this theme. So that's been really exciting. Here's another project. On my YouTube channel, you can find interviews with a organization called Iguanas from Above, which has basically been mapping out the migratory patterns of marine iguanas across the whole Galapagos archipelago. That is a multi-year project. It's very, very interesting. The drones they use is slightly bigger, but they need an awful lot of batteries to do that. It's been going for a while, and I think they mapped the archipelago out completely now. The third one is the Scubaverse. For disclosure, I am an advisor to the organization. It's a gaming digital twinning company that works very closely with the United Nations, and the idea is basically developing approaches that allows us to take real world data and turn it into a video game, but the video game has been used for citizen science purposes and also for determining local levels of pollution and then mitigating those. The idea is I'm sort of taking the aerial approach as the workflow I just showed you and pushing that further and doing the same thing underwater and collecting data for coral reefs. And here's an example. I'm not going to play it now, but there's also an extended version of this in the bonus of these slides, which is basically using my approach for mapping, and this is an island in the Maldives that has been mapped with using this drone-based approach, and then using the aerial data for modeling it and actually also including it in the video game itself. So whilst I bring this up here, as I said, these are all lightweight sub 250 gram drones with different features. They are most flexible from an operational envelope perspective. The V-copter that you can see is foldable, looks quite big, but actually it isn't. It weighs less than, a box of sugar, basically. This one is the DJI Neo. That's the only one here out of my collection that isn't foldable, but that is 135 grams, and it still can fly technically, not legally, 110 kilometers. Could I ask Kingstone to mute yourself, please, because I'm getting feedback from you into this talk. Thank you. And some of the AI features that come with most of these drones these days is things like obstacle avoidance, subject tracking, gesture controls. Gesture controls in particular has been around since, I think, first introduced in the DJI Spark, which is that red drone on here, probably 5 or 6 years ago now. And basically that means you do things like, you do this or you do that, it takes a picture, or you do this, and the AI picks up these patterns and responds to them. All of these drones really have got smart return to home features, which means if you lose connection with your radio controller, it just comes back to the place where it remembered that you sent it up. Obviously, all of that relies on mostly on GPS, a little bit of vision control as well for the 0 robotics drones. Then you got scene recognition for photography, so you can put your camera onto something and the drone might recognize, actually, this is a mountainous landscape, this is a sea, this is a marine coastal, and based on that it adjusts the camera settings automatically. A lot of audio editing and footage highlights, and in particular the DJI drones are known for having built-in AI editor features within their application. So you basically go out, send the drone up, collect the air footage, download it on your mobile phone or into the built-in AI editor. It does its thing and it does amazing edits on the go. And the idea is, of course, a lot of this is for bloggers or social media type people, particular things like these autonomous drones. The idea is you don't need a mobile phone necessarily, you don't need a controller, you just send the drone up, it does this thing autonomously, automatically, flies around you, flies above you, flies away from you, comes back, tracks you. In particular, this is interesting for a lot of people doing sports, and then you collect the footage and do all sorts of amazing video stuff with it. Then you got visual positioning systems. So most drones have got a couple of cameras at the bottom. The idea is not that they record what's happening underneath, but these cameras can do pattern recognition. And as basis of that, you see all of these actually have those two cameras. So you can recognize the terrain, and based on that, you can stabilize the flight, even if you haven't got any GPS signal. That is important in particular if you want to fly indoors with something like this. This is the Hover X1, the original one. You can see that's foldable, very lightweight. I think it's 125 grams. Again, you can see these two cameras built in here. And the idea is it can then, unless you've got some shiny surfaces, hold position even indoors, even with fairly low light conditions, very, very well, and then execute its autonomous features automatically around you. Some of them, not all of them, have got facial recognition, and then newer ones have also got voice control integration. So you can either talk to the phone and can say take off, land, and it does that, or you can talk to the drone, assuming it's got a microphone built in. Some of the new features as well, the hovers have got that, the DJI Neo has got that as well. They have got a algorithm built into the app. So basically what you can do is, if you're a blogger, you fly the drone, you record your voice with your phone through their app, bearing in mind your phone obviously has got a microphone built in. Now the app knows the sound frequency pattern of the propeller noises of the drone, overlays that, equals out that sound, and it becomes very, very quiet, and all you can hear is you basically talking. Now that only usually works if you have got the manufacturer's propellers. In this case, I haven't got the original ones. That comes with 3 blades. Normally I've got 5 blades on here because that's a little bit quieter and a much nicer pitch on the air, but that means that AI then doesn't work. And I tried that last week. It doesn't, you still can hear the drone a little bit humming in the background. But this is the sort of built-in AI features. Drones typically, this is all consumer drones, you can buy them in the shop or on Amazon, come with off the shelf like that. Now, what I want to do next is I want to talk a little bit about the main concerns people have around drones, because if you want to develop an ethical framework, you need to be aware of those, and you need to be able to develop some mitigants and approaches to tackle those. So the top concerns that I could find these days are around mostly privacy invasion and or unauthorized surveillance, security, cyber risks, safety risks, regulatory enforcement, airspace violations, ethical concerns, and this is related to privacy invasion about constant monitoring and spying. Use of drones in criminal activities. Yeah, that's true. So that's one of the reasons why in the UK and most other countries, I guess, there are no flight zones around prisons, for instance, because you can lift a bit of a weight with a drone like that, and you could drop drugs into prisons. Or even very small mobile phones, that kind of stuff. So there's no flight zones. Then you got noise pollution and community disturbances from drone flights. I'm in a very lucky position here because people know me quite well and the drones. I work very closely with the park rangers. I do a lot of explanation. I share the videos of what I do with them and with the local community, so people get used to it. But it is an educational process that takes a little bit of time. Lack of clear accountability for accidents or breaches. Yes and no. I mean, if you fly a drone, you should be a registered certified drone pilot. But like with anything, if you want to do criminal activity, you're not going to get a license for doing the criminal activity. You do it anyway. And you know, similar to a chainsaw, you can use a chainsaw to kill people. You can use a drone to do very silly things, but you can buy them in the shop. There's no particular restriction and no. There's a requirement in the UK to register flyer ID or an operator ID, but as I said, if you want to do criminal activities, you're not going to register yourself with the regulatory authority anyway. Then public disruption, and also bearing in mind today's theme, climate, environmental impact, including disturbances to wildlife. So whilst these are the top 10 concerns around drones, I want to debunk the most important ones around that, because I don't think this is things in people's minds, but until they actually have seen one of these drones, how it flies, what you can see on the screen, and what it records, this is largely myths, and I think they are worthwhile dispelling before we going into developing governance approaches for AI drones. So let's talk about privacy invasion first. I took the Neo, this little thing, last week in my park, and I thought, okay, let's do this. Let's take a few pictures from different heights and give you guys a perspective, bird's eye perspective of what this would look like. Now, I'm based outside London, so I thought, okay, let's fly up to 100 meters. Big Ben, I think, is 96 meters. So that's a good example. If I do that, you can see there this little H in the middle. That's the home point. That's superimposed by the drone. So the drone obviously knows based on the GPS features where I am. And if you look at that 100 meters, you can't really see anything, to be honest, other than, you know, an A and the park and the path, and that was it. Okay, let's go down a little bit, 50 meters. This, again, London-based people who know Trafalgar Square will know what this is. This is Nelson Column. It's, I think, just about 50 meters high. So I took the drone down to 50 meters, again, just for size comparison to see what this looks like. Still not much different, to be honest. Couldn't find anything that has 25 meters in London or anything well-known, popular. So I took the Hollywood sign, which apparently with foundations and the posts it's attached to, it's about 25 meters. So 25 meters drone up, still quite high. You can see me there as a dot, but frankly, you couldn't see what's on my mobile phone screen. You can't even make out what the logo is on my head and so on. So, you know, saying from a privacy invasion perspective, quite frankly, this is ridiculous. Now, lastly, 2 London buses, double-decker buses, stacked on top of each other, is about 9.5 meters apparently. So I took the drone 10 meters. You can see some of the AI features are kicking in here. So the drone actually recognizes now my back on the floor, and it also recognizes me standing there. But that is pretty much it. And frankly, unless you use a much more expensive drone, which tend to be usually bigger, with a zoom of, I don't know, 2 times, 5 times, 7 times maybe. Some of the very big ones got 20 times zoom, even optical zoom. then of course you'll be able to maybe see what's on my phone screen here. But other than that, with a normal consumer drone like this one, or even like that one, the Mini 3 Pro, it's not really possible, even at 10 meters. And if you're sitting in your back garden on your deck chair and someone is flying a drone over at 10 meters or lower, I can guarantee you will hear that, because this thing, even with the noise cancelling propellers, is still quite hummy. We'll come to noise in a minute, give you an idea what that sounds like. So from a constant monitoring and spying perspective, that's a bit of a myth, and that needs debunking. There's one of the other reasons why that would be so, because if you think about it, you've got these batteries here, tiny batteries, lithium-ion usually, high-powered batteries, but frankly, and there's a list of different brands, different models, they don't last that long, to be honest. And if you wanted to constantly monitor and spy someone, you would have to come up with something different than with one of these drones, because otherwise every 10-15 minutes you have to get it up, down, change the battery, and you also need to have a lot of batteries. They don't usually come with many batteries, 1 to 3 maybe in a combo box, but that is it then. And you can see here I went through some of my own flights, going back 500 flights or so. The longest flight time I could find in here is 22 minutes. I don't know what I was doing, possibly doing some mapping exercise, which means I actually wasn't really flying. I put the drone up and it was turning into this flying robot and doing a thing by itself. And if that's a bigger lake, then it might have been taking a little bit longer. But this constant monitoring, spying is another myth about these drones. Yes, of course, the military uses them, but military drones are very, very differently built. And, this thing costs about maybe $400 now. A military drone, you're looking at, I don't know, possibly $4 to $5 million, possibly much more. So very, very different animal, and not comparative. Then let's talk a little bit about cyber and cyber risk and security. So I've taken an example. This is the typical kind of data that a drone would collect in the background, and if you've got the relevant software, you can get this out of it after. So for instance, you can see here the drone make, drone model, serial numbers, what batteries I've used, the flight time, whether there was an uplink and a downlink signal, batteries. But frankly, this is all drone and flight specific. This has nothing to do with sending the drone up over a military installation and then being able to capture a lot of data that is related to that. Drones do take sometimes pictures. So the picture that you see popping up here, superimposed in this third-party software, is actually a picture that the drone took whilst I was flying it, and then it overlays it on the Google map. But again, if you go on Google Earth, you get better picture quality and the ability to zoom in much closer than with one of these drones. So that's just another myth, and that's a political play ball, particularly in the US, where the US government is going down the route of trying to get Chinese companies off the market. Very similar to what we've seen with mobile phones, Chinese mobile phones being pushed out of the market because there's a concern that they spy, that they have built some built-in chips and feedback some data to other states, to other countries. So yes, there's a lot of data collection going on here, but the data is flight specific and drone specific. It's got nothing to do with the location. It's got nothing to do what you do with the drone. But obviously, if I have a problem, for instance, you can see at the bottom my flight log, there's a medium risk. I get the strong wind warning popping up. You saw that at one of the pictures early on, because again, the AI is intelligent enough to warn me as a pilot, say there's some risks here. If I go back because I have a crash and I want to understand why I crashed, and or I'm the manufacturer of the drone and I want to understand why this thing crashed, then I need to have that data, and that's why they collect that information. But that's very different to actual spying. What have we got now? Okay, safety airspace violations. Now, more recently, there have been a few cases, very highly publicized, very hyped up by the media, of cases, and some frankly very stupid pilots as well. So this is the remains of a DJI Mini 3. similar, very similar to this one. You can see this one hasn't got the battery in here. You can see on the screen there's actually the battery. This one was found earlier this year. You remember these horrible fires in Los Angeles. There was actually a fire engine aircraft that got badly damaged. Well, badly damaged. It got damaged by this drone, and you can see some, excuse my French, idiot pilot was flying the drone there to collect whatever he was collecting, filming, I suppose, some of their actions. He should have known much better, because there was a flight restriction, so he shouldn't even put the drone up legally. It crashed, and these parts were then collected inside the wing. You can see the hole it caused, so it caused quite a bit of damage, was very highly publicized. But if you then look at how many drones have been sold globally, how many flights are undertaken daily around the world, you very quickly come to the conclusion that the evidence, certainly for these sub 249 gram consumer drones, suggests that this is actually one of the safest forms of recreational technology ever developed. One of the reasons is also the AI that's been built in, because you get all the augmentation with additional features. There have been zero confirmed, as far as I know, fatalities and minimal serial incidents over the last 5 years, with an unprecedented safety record. And that would also then suggest that current safety frameworks are effective and proportionate to the actual risks. These little tiny things, and bearing in mind this one, for instance, is 135 grams. It's nothing. Think about it. This is actually lighter than your mobile phone, and I can technically fly at 10 kilometers away. Of course, not legally. Legally, I'm supposed to fly within the so-called VLOS, visual line of sight. But the technology is there, and it's actually very, very safe. And when you see one of these things flying, particularly with a smartphone, they're very nimble, they're very controllable, they're very slow as well. So the speed has been, by technology, reduced deliberately. And that makes it all much, much safer altogether. So noise pollution and disturbances are looked into the typical noise that's being expelled by these drones, and we have the sort of level ranging there from a normal conversation like we're having now to traffic noise, vacuum cleaner, and a lorry that's passing by closely. And you can see here that that's the range of these drones. Typically what you will find is these drones with slightly bigger propellers, like the Mini 3 Pro or the V-copter here, they're quite, you can see these propellers are quite large. They're usually quite quiet. This one is fairly new out. This is particularly quiet when you're flying it in the field. Whereas what I call the little squeakers, the hover, something like this, has got tiny propellers. And the DJI Neo, this is when I got this, I took the factory installed propellers off before even flying it, because I knew it's going to be awful. Not so much in terms of the level of sound, the noise, but in terms of the pitch, the humming, and it just gives you a headache. But you can reduce this by the factory one has got 3 blades. If you put 5 blades on, you can reduce that because you're increasing the surface of that. And that also means the noise pollution disturbances are kept to a minimum. This one in particular, when I fly this one in my local parks to do some wildlife observations, over 15 meters height or so, you can barely hear it, and to the point where people don't even notice it's there, even when you fly closely past or above them, because it just is so quiet. And sometimes I know it's there, but I have to look up to see where it actually is, because I can't hear it myself. I can see it on the screen, and I can see the footage it's feeding back, but you got to keep an eye on these things anyway. But from a audible perspective, you sometimes lose track because they're so quiet. And then finally, also some of the concerns about environmental impact on wildlife. This is another project I'm working with. This is a stork's nest, because we're trying to get some storks reintroduced here. So wildlife observation, you need to be mindful of things like, of course, legal restrictions. You need to minimize disturbances, get permissions from the landowners. For instance, when I fly here in my local bird sanctuary, if I know there is breeding season, then I don't tend to fly over there and disturb the nesting activity, and or I speak to the park rangers first to see whether whether they need anything and whether it's okay to do that. And then, of course, you also need to get relevant insurance in place, as well as do the risk assessment and put response protocols in place. So if you feel that the wildlife is disturbed by your activities, then you should abort the mission and bring the drone back. But this is really just common sense stuff. This isn't particularly, particularly difficult, particularly when you work in this area all the time. Now, that then brings me to the ethics part. I'm skipping now on the time here. I think we're still good. From an ethics perspective, I said this earlier on already, we don't, if you want to develop ethical frameworks for the governance of AI drones, you don't want to start from scratch, really. So what you're looking for is, you don't want to reinvent the wheel, which is what I'll put here. So you pull this back, you don't reinvent the wheel, and you just look at what's currently out there from an AI ethics perspective. This is a non-exhaustive selection. Obviously, I do a lot of work with the UN. I'll give you a little bit more background about that in a minute, but there's a whole range of principles, guidelines, ethically aligned design, recommendations out there that you can consult when you want to use drones ethically, AI drones, within your business, and this is really a reference to go to. Now, I mentioned this early on. I tried to keep this very brief, but this is my so-called ad break, because the work I've been doing with the United Nations goes back to, well, initially 2013. The work that has focused on what I call AI and tech, which is artificial intelligence, neurotechnologies, and robotics, and a lot of it was actually inspired by drones like the ones I showed you, but it was also inspired more recently by devices such as this one that has got built-in embedded AI systems, is the regulatory compliance of products with embedded AI and other digital technologies. And before I do that, I've been concerned for a while about the relationship between AI and human control, in particular devices that have got built-in AI, autonomous features, and allowed to do things automatically. That means there is a level of autonomy of an AI system which is basically fully capable of modifying its operating domain without any external intervention, control, and or oversight by humans. And then also increasingly they are acquiring much more agency, which is the capacity of AI systems to act autonomously. And that means they can increasingly influence and interact with physical and or also virtual environments. And that means we need to think about all of these risk factors from a human control perspective. In other words, I've got these four quadrants here across the axis of the AI autonomy and agency. The status quo, this is where the world is right now, more or less from a development perspective, in terms of autonomy and agency, is worth monitoring and researching, but bearing in mind that there's an awful lot of money / hype thrown at AI development, in particular multi-agent AI systems. We need to carefully balance all of this development and protect individual freedoms. At the bottom here, you got the human oversight and control. That's where typical regulatory risk management approaches kick in. And then at the top here, this is what we got to be mindful of, because this is what I would call humanity's tail risk. Now, if you're familiar with the black swan from my dear friend Nassim Nicholas Taleb, you will be familiar with long tails and short tails and thin tails and thick tails. And that's basically the tail of the risk management development here when it comes to autonomy and agency. We need to keep this tail here thin, because the thicker the tail becomes, the more there's a chance and a risk that we lose human control. So as a result of that, since 2020, I started first for 2 years researching what I call AI and tech, artificial intelligence, neurotechnology, and robotics. And then I proposed to the UN to develop initially a recommendation around this, but this recommendation then turned eventually into a common regulatory arrangement, which is a formalized approach for all member states, and then also into a declaration which was formally acknowledged, approved last year at the annual session, and is now out with the member states for their signatures. And we're now getting in the first member state signing. So we got Hungary, Kuwait, talking to some European member states of the UN at the moment, and in a week's time or so, actually it's next week, there's the 35th annual session in Geneva, where we are formally launching this declaration, further introducing it, talking about it from a AI and products with embedded AI systems perspective, and then hoping we're making much more progress. You would have seen, I think a couple of weeks ago, there was a General Assembly Resolution 2 actually, very heavily focused on artificial intelligence. So all this work is feeding into that, and that will continue. But that's only something I'm doing pro bono, because I think it's very, very important, and there's some more references in here. Very quickly, what's covered in this common regulatory arrangement. So it talks about the scope. This all follows a prescribed format by one of the United Nations models. Then it talks about product service requirements. The only two things that are not covered by this is autonomous vehicles. The reason for that is because there's a separate UN directive that covers those, but drones and submarine, so underwater drones, are both covered by this piece as well. And the other one, I said this at the beginning, that's not covered is national defense, because national defense and autonomous weapons are covered by the nation states themselves and not under the UN. I think it should be. I've been pushing for a while to get something done in this space, and I know others have as well, but there's a lot of more work that needs doing. So the declaration is out there. There's a link here in the presentation. You can go on there. If you search for my name, and on the UNITSI website, you will find all of this stuff. Also, I would recommend, if you like, please do follow and sign up with the Human AI Institute, because all the policy development work I do with the UN, I'm actually putting out there and sharing as much as I can. There's also a subsite now on the UN around the digital regulation of goods, which ties in very closely with all of this work. So please do follow. I'll keep updating, and I hope you find this interesting. Which brings me almost to the end of this presentation, the ethical governance of AI drones. And the way I've been thinking about this is, well, I said, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, because all this ethical stuff is already out there. But let's take a drone and let's look at some of the key components, in that case, the motors and the propellers. Obviously, there's more. But the first sort of motor centerpiece that fits into that is we need to think about it from a regulatory perspective. If you want to take something like this, and yeah, it's small, but it's still an aircraft. It's not much different to a plane. The difference is, in a plane, I sit in it. This one, I don't sit in. I was connected through a controller. But there's regulatory requirements that you need to be aware of, including national aviation laws. So in the UK, that would be the Civil Aviation Authority. In Europe, that would be the European Airspace Safety Agency. Then, of course, and that is related to some of the concerns we mentioned early on, data privacy and protection, international standards, and a general industry code. The next pillar or motor that's driving the ethical governance of AI drones are the stakeholders. So I'm a stakeholder, I'm the pilot, but I also got end clients, I got park rangers I work with, I got the general public, I got potentially involved other stakeholders, other charities who want to get the data, do something with it. So you need to be mindful of how are your activities governed within the community, and that could mean formal governance or informal governance. Public participation, I think, is very important because it makes your life as a pilot much easier. You need to be transparent about what you're doing, and you also need to be somewhat cultural sensitive. So I have flown the drone on my, on my graveyard here to do some mapping exercises of the church building and the chapel. But you need to be mindful of if there's a funeral currently ongoing. People don't want to have. It's the last thing people want is a drone flying over, or religious monuments. Whatever, people are sensitive, and you need to take this into account. Technical safeguards. You need to think about issues such as data security, particularly when you're collecting that information. How reliable are these things? There's a lot of fail-safe mechanisms that are built in. You've seen the strong wind warning early on, but you get a whole range of error messages. For instance, if you lose connection, if your battery is going low, if you're losing signal, that kind of stuff, but you need to be mindful of that. And the AI needs to be explainable, so you need to understand as a pilot how this AI stuff works. And finally, because you are the pilot, the last motor here really that's driving these activities is the human oversight. So you need to always keep meaningful control of these things. Yes, they are flying robots when they're doing what they're doing, but I should be in control. And if there's a problem, I should be able to either hit the pause button so it just stops and hovers in the air and doesn't do anything else, or I can disrupt the flight, bring it back, abort the mission altogether. So I always need to be in charge. You should never let the AI take over. So there needs to be an accountability chain and meaningful control altogether. Finally, maybe one of the most important things is use your common sense, which isn't that common. If it doesn't feel right, because the gut feeling is telling you don't do it, it's too windy, there's a cloud there, you might get thunderstorm, whatever, some local factors, there's a flock of birds, if you fly closely over them, they might be disrupted by a drone and they all fly up, and then the drone crashes, you injure the wildlife, injure the birds, whatever. Simply don't do it. Common sense, sadly not always that common, but that's also important. Which then brings me to the bonus material, and that is something you can do as homework if you like. I say thank you very much for having me. You will get the slides in one way or another. I sent already a link to Moinak last night. You can probably just distribute that. And if there's any questions, I might have gone a little bit over time-wise, I'm not sure. I'm very happy to answer those if I have got the answers for you. Otherwise, find me on LinkedIn. When you do send me an invite, please put in WITS Global Conference so I know where this is coming from, because I get a lot of spam and I don't normally accept invitations, but I'm very happy to connect with students from WITS if that is of interest. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Marcus, for that insightful presentation on the ethical use of AI drone. It's quite an eye-opener. There's a lot of stuff that we didn't know about drones, and it opens up a lot of avenues for potential research on how we can utilize these drones for a number of things: satellite imagery. I can imagine climate change, informing sustainable finance. There's a lot that you can use these technologies for that. And I think this is an emerging area. And if you have questions, I know that there are questions. So please feel free. We've got another five minutes or so to ask questions. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Krebs. It's a very interesting, presentation. And very recently, I also received a grant from Afritech, to working on this similar line on the ethics and AI of this drone. So definitely you will be in touch. But you already mentioned in your presentation, military drones and common drones. So maybe I like to, just like to know your opinion, like the military drones, because recently we have seen that it has been used for your Russia-Ukraine conflict. Even during your this Israel, they have used. So in such case, do you think that still these drones are, really ethical, or maybe we need to work more on that part? Yeah.
I mean, the drones themselves are not ethical or unethical. They are just a tool, right? I can use a chainsaw, petrol-powered chainsaw, in an ethical way when I want to manage my forest and I'm wearing, protective gear and I'm being very careful. Or I can take a petrol-powered chainsaw and go on a train or tube and start it off and start. This is a bit coarse, but cutting people up or whatever, a bit like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So the drone itself is a tool. It's the humans who are behind who have to decide how they use it and whether or not they want to use it like that. What I would say is manufacturers, particularly Chinese mass manufacturers of drones, are becoming much more conscious of the reputational risks that YouTube and social media might pose to them if a drone like this is being used to drop a payload on someone, on a soldier in any country. I'm not saying which one, it doesn't matter, happens everywhere, and kills them. And for instance, the new anti-gravity drone that's coming out, I think in January, just the first drone that has got full 360 vision. So basically that hasn't got a camera at the front, it's got a camera on top, camera at the bottom, a bit like an Insta 360 camera. But what they have built cleverly into, and they use it as part of the marketing video already, they have got a payload detector, and if the drone detects that there is a little grenade attached on top of that, it knows it's got different weights because it knows there is additional drag and it's pulling it further down. Then it will say payload detected and just land. So you can't use it technically anymore to drop bombs on people. That is possible with, you don't even need AI for that. That's just a simple algorithm. And similarly, these DJI drones, for a while, they had payload detection on there. You could get propeller guards if you want to fly inside rooms instead of outside. But if you attach the propeller guards, the weight changes slightly. They detect that, and they will automatically slow down the speed and also limit the speed that you can apply to those and use them. But that's what I said at the beginning and throughout this presentation. It depends how you use it. The criminals won't use a drone ethically. The criminals won't use a knife or a gun ethically. The criminals do what they do. They use this as very powerful tools to kill and maim people. Same with the drone. So the drone in itself is, it's not ethical or unethical. It's how the human uses it, which gives it an unethical or ethical use. That's the difference, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other question, comment? James?
Thanks. Just one couple of quick questions, just on the difference between automation and autonomy.
Yeah.
The difference between, say, a home feature, which means I as a pilot don't have to actually pilot the drone to land it. That's a useful bit of automation.
Yeah.
Versus in the civilian case, what is a drone going to be doing that I don't have any input or control over or any discretion over? And then the second question is, how much of this question of the ethics with drones is about whether we're talking about a drone, or as you said earlier, the issue that it's a flying camera that bothers people? I just mean in the civilian setting, not in the military sense.
Yes, good question. I mean, from an autonomy perspective, the autonomy and agency of these drones is somewhat limited by their operational envelope, and that includes and operational limitations, and that includes things like battery and so on. So they can't switch themselves on by themselves normally. Yet, well, consumer drones can't. There is drones available that can automatically get activated. So for instance, DJI has got drones. They are sitting in a sort of waterproof container somewhere outside the prison. If the prison detects there is a movement, you could link the alert trigger to that drone. The box opens up, the drone flies up, then takes pictures, records what's going on, and sends messages to somewhere. So that's all possible. For consumer drones, you're limited by battery life, operational envelope, and they are getting increasingly more autonomous. So in particular, things like this one or like that one, you don't need a mobile phone or controller for it. You can either, with both of them actually, you can do it through button control. So there's just very simple selection buttons, but that still means there's a built-in human control feature that you are pressing the button and the drone then executes. The drone isn't doing it yet by itself. From a flying camera perspective, features are getting much better. That has to do with the size of the sensors, the number of pixels that is capable to record, the ability to get low light footage, even in complete darkness, the ability to attach infrared thermal imaging sensors on these drones. The only challenge, I would say, is for normal users is still the sort of price point. So if you want a fully fledged thermal imaging drone that can fly at night, complete dark, and watch what's going on. So for instance, if you're a burglar and want to see someone is in the house, in the premises, whatever, you're looking at easily £4,000 to £5,000 investment, I should say. So the price point is stopping that. And from a privacy perspective, I think it's really this perception in people's mind. If there's a drone flying above me, it's going to look at me. So that's the other thing I was going to say. With these drones, you've got the gimbal camera here, which in this case is a three-axis gimbal camera. But just because the drone is flying above you, unless you know that the gimbal is turned down and exactly looking at you, if it's like this, it's looking in the further distance. So that you could have the drone above you and is not even seeing you or looking at you. You need to know that the camera is actually looking at you. And then you've seen the sample pictures, which, by the way, I forgot to say this because we got hung up on the video. I included sample pictures of the screen that I see, screenshots basically, in the slides that you saw earlier. But in the bonus materials of the slides, you also got the actual pictures I took in A4. So you get a good idea what that would look like. Obviously, it wouldn't look any different, but it gives you a view of what the drone view from 10, 25, 50, and 100 meters looks like. And there is this perception, I think probably fueled by Hollywood movies and also maybe video games, that if there's a drone, then there's an imminent danger in the air because it's likely going to do something. If I fly my drone in the park, chances are I might be flying above 50 people or so. Obviously not all at the same time. There's a couple of people here, there's family here, there's some people at the playground there. I'm not interested in any of those. But I need to be prepared if someone's coming over to me as a drone pilot that, you've been flying there, you've been spying on me, you've been doing something, you've been taking pictures of my children. I need to explain then, and I need to be able to show the pictures if they want to see them as well. And obviously I'm certified. I've got my little lanyard and my card. I've got a letter from the council as well, because normally I wouldn't be legally allowed to fly in these parks here. So you need to have special permission to exempt me from the bylaws to do that. So there's all sorts of legal things you need to keep in mind. But again, it's easy for anyone to go out, buy one of these in the shop, stick the batteries in, charge it up, put it up in the air without any registration, without any certification. And if you have that sort of attitude, then you don't care about the regulatory limits of any of this anyway. You just do it. So maybe it's maybe there's a requirement for police and or other authorities to becoming a little bit more robust with drone pilots and check on them, because, you know, probably I'd say out of 10 drone pilots, you get 2 that are sort of rogue, 2 to 3 that are rogue, that are not registered, and they don't care about ethics, and they just fly wherever they want to.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marcus. We are out of time. Another round of applause.
Thank you for having me, and please do reach out if you've got any more questions.